next we have Dr. Shiraev and his panel on cancel culture and theory. Eric, Josh, Compton, and Daniel Lam, they graciously agreed to let our international speakers go first because it's late in their countries and they all need to go to bed soon. So they can present last.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Dr. Samoilenko. Thank you, Serge. Thank you, my friends. We'll take into account. Yes, this is exactly, it's late in Europe, in Asia. It's 2:15, 2:20 in the United States, in the East Coast, sorry about that. And then this is much different in Europe. So that's why we will begin, as you suggested, with the second presenter today. Quick just intro. I'm Eric Shiraev. I am a trained psychologist, political psychologist, and political scientist. I teach in the fields of culture studies and political psychology and communication studies and sociology. So it's a diverse field of interest. And today we have a wonderful lineup of scholars who will introduce their studies and share with us. And I'm humbled to simply introduce them and maybe moderate this discussion a little bit. Okay, so as far as I understand, Dr. Samoilenko, Sergei, so will be Mykola Bondarenko will be here from Taras Shevchenko National University of Ukraine. And the presentation is the sociology of character assassination. Mykola, welcome. Just, the floor is yours.
Hello, dear colleagues. I'm happy. Do you hear me? Yeah, it's all good.
Yes, we hear you well. Mm-hmm.
Okay, nice. I'm happy to be here tonight because it's actually 9 p.m. in here. So you're right, we're going to sleep, I guess. My name is Nikolai. I'm a PhD student. It's my last year in Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv, which is in Ukraine. You can see that on my map. Let me demonstrate my screen for you.
Nikolai, we know what when Ukraine is. Yes, we know. But thank you for reminding us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, do you see the screen right now? Yeah. Okay, good. So, I'm going to tell you about the sociology of character assassination tonight. So, I guess for the beginning, I guess we'll agree here, according to our CARP colleagues, character assassination is a deliberate and sustained effort to damage the reputation or credibility of an individual, social groups, institutions, corporations, which all could experience loss of the reputation. So this concept is actually about reputation. The key to understand the approach I am going to present you today is a sociological approach, is that reputation is not only the very important element of public life, but also it's a social concept. So branding, image, reputation, wherever they has become a significant part of a public profile, whether it's one person, company, institution, other entity that somehow represents itself to the audience. So having a good reputation means trust, interest, loyalty, etc. Sociology itself, it focuses regarding to character assassination on 3 points: is how to catch this character assassination if that happened, then how to analyze and measure it, and in the end how we can compare it to, for instance, different manifestation of character assassination in different historical periods, for different political campaigns, for different companies, anything else. So I'm going to focus on 2 areas. It's theories and methods. As of theories, from my research, I found out that its dissemination of character assassination goes by the rules of not only social psychology and political science, but it's also very adjustment to sociology in terms of, for instance, communication models. such as model of Laswell or McQuail, and it can be perceived as a simplified model that is actually consists of the transmitter, of the medium, of the receiver, of the audience, and of the effect. So it's like a path which on which character assassination can go from like one person to actually changing the public image of entity, company, wherever. So, and also the structure of this concept is rather close to specific sociological theories, such as Irving Goffman's, who is famous for his dramaturgical approach and the approach for strategic interaction. As you can see on the slide, there are words like implementation, expression, audience, mask, role. I'm going to explain you that. It actually explains the process of character assassination because it is operating between the several elements. For instance, the role is the thing that a character assassin and the victim they take on their faces. So it's actually the role of character assassin or a victim. The mask, it's about the audience, what the audience is going to see after or during the character assassination, or what they're not going to see if, for instance, the assassin wants to remain hidden. Another important things from this theory is dramatic implementation. It's a kind of a performance or message that shows victims' shameful features for the audience. A negative idealization, it draws a demonized picture of a victim in audience's minds. And it also important to have the expression control. And also don't forget that there might be some misconceptions which may launch the wrong message to the audience, and they won't believe a character assassination. And also, there is such thing as mystifications. It's a specific information that can increase the interest in actor or victim in the performance. So, by supporting of these concepts, we can have the structural elements that are suitable both for sociology, political science, and social psychology. Continuing with the methods, the main question I put before myself while I was writing this short abstract and this presentation for you, it's not only what are the common things between character assassination in different fields of science and in theories, but also how we can measure it actually, because I guess that is the most important questions. We can name that character assassinations happen somehow, but how do we measure it? How do we actually approach it and understand its social impact and so on. So there's a variety of sociological methods that we can use. For instance, we've got surveys and polls. With the help of them, we may measure possible or post factum changes in reputation after the assassination attempt in specific social groups, because we can, as it is a quantitative method, we survey or conduct a poll with many people, and we can, after that, see what exact audiences mostly react to the specific message or something. For example, we can also use the questions of what if and when for our pollings. Like an example, if you will acknowledge that some political leader did X, for instance, did something, misbehaved somehow, will you still vote for them? And that's how we can see if attitude toward them is going to change. Or another question, some say that political leader did something. How does that affect your attitudes towards them directly? And people can answer in closed forms of questions, like, well, what do they think of it? Another thing is focus groups and in-depth interviews. They're good because with them we can search for internal reasons of people of why can they react somehow to character assassination attempt. These methods can deal with a fixation of these exact reasons, also about the specific content or message. For instance, if we are going to conduct a focus group where we have like 8 people sitting in one room and we're going to show them some negative advertising or something, they can tell us of their reaction in this exact time. And we will know what do they feel towards a person or a company after the ad they just watched or after the quote we can give them. And it also is going to help us to deeply realize the reasons to believe or not to believe in a specific character assassination regarding to those people. Another thing is in expert interviews. They're good because experts may link the modern examples of character assassination to the other examples from different historical periods. They can point out to those who might be interested in character assassination if we don't know that if it's closed information. And also the most important thing is that they can evaluate the reputational and social influence of character assassination on the concrete situation somehow. Other things, so as you can see, the sociological methods come to help in here, and you can first of all, fixate the character assassination attempt that exists, like put a quote in there, and we can decompose it to the elements and then analyze it and look into the reasons why it applied. If we can approach this from the two sides, also from the content side and from the visual side. As to the content, we can see who says what, when, where, and how. It is about what kind of topics are mostly applicable to character assassination regarding this or that political leaders. What was the exact content of that? What tone of voice people were using for that? Was it a contrast attacks? Was it a fully negative attacks? Was it something else? And also regarding visual analysis, we can see the whole context or discourse. We can see the situation, what for, who were the main characters, for instance, is in this negative ad or something. What did they do in there? What's the symbolism behind this advertisement? What values are translated by this message? And it fully creates a framework for a comparison between different types of between different character attacks, for instance, on one person or another. So that's how we can compare throughout history and throughout even the modern period between different opponents. Let's go to the examples. So here you can see it's just a screenshot from the 2 minutes advertisement of Donald Trump's campaign against Hillary Clinton in 2016. It was used during the presidential election campaign. So this is an example of character assassination. You can find this video online. If you want it, I'll give you the link to that. So only looking at this picture, we can decompose it sociologically on different elements. We can surely name that the topic for this exact character assassination was the corruption schemes. The context is first, the election was during that time, and that the corruption of Hillary Clinton, as it says here, was exposed again, meaning the context of her previous fails. So they also refer to her previous deeds. As of concrete visuals, we can see the purpose here is to show the negative of Hillary Clinton, and it also goes with the discourse of election, which is going to fully affect people's lives. So it's not just about her, it's also about people. And the one of the symbols of there is a flag on the left. You can see it, but it is blurred, a bit visual. So what do we see here? What does Hillary do? How does she look? We can measure that, we can see that, and we can explain that sociologically. For instance, here we can see that she looks from behind something like she's hiding. So that is looking insincere. And the appellation to people to transmitted value is a sincerity, which, as authors try to show, does not coincide with her look. So it's just one of the simplest techniques I'm showing you here. And just imagine it's one scene and one shot from one clip, and there's multiple of them for the sociological analysis. So it leads to the conclusion that there's so much more to study. I thought the perspectives of sociological approach, they are really unlimited. So there's a lot of more methods to use, not only those five I showed you. There is also grounded theory, intent analysis, observation, etc., etc. So you can use like any method to measure character assassination in different ways. It could give a more comprehensive understanding, by the way, if here we managed to make a thing that of theoretical concept plus the concrete examples of it. So theory plus methodology, it comes here. Disciplines, a field of study is really wide. The more to know in international relationship, we can learn more with sociology plus psychology approach, with sociology plus linguistic aspects. And the mix of those approaches would give us rather creative results. I believe in that. And also the most important things is this effect of this approach. It's prognostic potential. By studying character assassination, you can answer the question where, who, and how manipulates the society and how it could affect people's minds. Those burden the public and helping them to minimize the manipulative effects of character assassination. So I guess that's it for now. If you want to ask something, please do.
Thank you, Nikolai. Thank you so much for being on time. I appreciate this. I didn't have to say anything, by the way. And yes, your final comments about who, when, and how, and with what effect. This is what we're interested in. And the sociology of character assassination is something new to us and wonderful. Wow, this is, if you develop this field, that still will be innovative. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch, of course. And if you stick around, if you hold on, the end of the discussion, I believe there'll be questions, and I will have some questions, of course. And thank you so much for just being with us and presenting your wonderful paper. Well, now, if it is right order, I would like to let's move to Greece again. It's getting late in Greece too, but not as late as it is in Ukraine, just maybe 1 or 2 hours difference. Neofytos Aspriadis of University of Peloponesse, Greece, towards a character assassination typology and of interstate rhetorical attacks. And we know you, we know what you do, and just, well, this is your floor right now. Just please, just go ahead. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Greetings from Greece. It's evening right now, late in the night, I say. It's so let me. You see my presentation now?
We see, we hear you well. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I am currently a visiting research fellow at the department, as you earlier said, of Political Studies and International Relations at the University of Peloponese. And the aim of my research is to establish basically a character assassination typology that is being used in international politics in the framework of interstate rhetorical attacks. This attempt is based mainly on 3 observations. First, that strategic communication performs an increasingly prominent role in international relations and conflicts. Often states aim to deconstruct or even destroy the image of their opponents, who attempt to threaten their legitimacy or trustworthiness and to destabilize their position in the international system. And this was actually the case first studied in chapter 17 in the handbook of character assassination. And the second is based on character assassination theory, and mainly that character attacks may be directed against collective entities and can be very powerful in influencing a public audience, and that such attacks can often be applied by extension to an entire group. For instance, attacks on candidates from different race or ethnic groups may be perceived as attacks on an entire group. So character attacks against another political leader may undermine the image of the nation. Like, for example, demonizing the enemy might prevent any dialogue from taking place, as negotiating with an evil enemy may appear as striking a deal with the devil, as Norman mentions. So according to these observations, there is an easy extension of character assassination theory of the domestic political communication landscape to the international political environment, especially now when communication plays a direct role in state affairs and diplomacy. So a definition of interstate character assassination may be the pursuit of states to destroy the image of an opponent state. The term includes the process and the outcome of a systematic attempt of the political elite of a country to defame an opponent in the international political environment. So interstate character assassination, we refer to as country reputation assassination in the handbook at first. This is still on a debate, is a strategic communication tool used often in conflict. Through this process, a country pursues strategic and diplomatic goals. And interstate character assassination can aim against political leaders that are being identified with the country and against the country itself by referring to the country as an entity of its own, or even against its people. So having this in mind, the second step was to research whether there was a pattern in the use of specific rhetorical strategies by country leaders to establish the so-called interstate character assassination. Therefore, at first, a literature review was undertaken in the literature of character assassination and the rhetoric of attacks in order to gather attack strategies from the field of political communication and eventually develop a typology for character assassination in the international political context. After the typology was developed, a ground theory approach was used for the research in order to test if the typology had a practical use. This means that a top-down approach was used for establishing the codes based on the literature review, and afterwards a down-to-top approach for testing of the typology. So the two case studies were used is the invasion of Iraq and the Ukraine crisis of 2014. And for the analysis, qualitative content analysis and rhetorical discourse analysis was used for the speeches of President Bush during the invasion of Iraq and of President Obama for the Ukraine crisis in 2014. So here we can have, here we can have a slide overview, a quick overview of the typology that was established. As we can see, they were divided into 6 major categories, which contain sub-strategies that may be either used to define the major category or are strategies which form the general strategy, as we will see in the coming examples. So here is the other 3, together is 6 grand typologies. So strategic deception includes actions, or discourse that aim to prevent a second party to know the whole truth or get the whole picture. Strategic deception is a general strategy in which attackers use to distort and mislead the opponent, as well as public opinion regarding the intentions and the image of the opponent. It is also used to accuse opponents of misleading in order to invalidate their claims. And the sub-strategy of the first sub-strategy that was identified is fake accusations, which are defined as non-existent or deliberate fake accusations of a perpetrator against a victim they are exposed by the victim and recognized as false because they are followed by the denial of the victim for the correctness. This category has been identified through the ground theory approach. It was not found through the literature. So this is an example here from Obama. He says that it is absurd to suggest, as the steady drumbeat Russia voices do, that America is somehow conspiring with the fascists inside of Ukraine or failing to respect the Russian people. And he moves that my grandfather served in Patton's army, just as many of your fathers and grandfathers fought against fascism. So basically what he is doing is he uses a strategy of denial together with a strategy of bolstering for his image. And so he tries to show that the accusations of Russia are false and cannot be true. And this mainly deconstructs the credibility of the country. The second is identification, which is defined as the identification of the opponent with politicians or other public figures, or with policies with negative characteristics. The identification can also be done by visual means, such as photographs, etc. So we have the example that from President Bush saying that and identifying basically Iraq in general, and in particular also Saddam Hussein in other discourses, saying that Al-Qaeda terrorists, he identifies basically with the Iraq with the Al-Qaeda terrorists and makes direct connections, which is public figures and with a very negative context, the terrorists and Al-Qaeda itself. The other strategy is association. This strategy correlates all the negative characteristics inherent in the mind of the audience with the name of the opponent, and at the same time creates an image completely opposite to positive characteristics. Here, President Obama associates Russia with negative characteristics and actions like disruption and chaos, and saying that they believe that all this is provoked by Russia in eastern Ukraine. The next is plausible deniability, which is a strategy used often in hybrid warfare context, and means the possibility of denying actions in the absence of evidence or proof. As a rhetorical strategy, it is used to deny an act or an event which the subjects know who has done it, but it is not possible either because of national interest or for other reasons to prove or even make it public. So this enables the perpetrator to deny the act in a plausible manner. So in addition, the denying party may project other reasons that the obvious ones or those that the other party anticipates as a justification for his actions. This misleads the public from the real reasons. It, as a rhetorical now attack strategy, can be used by one party to demonstrate how this strategy is used and thus to expose or deconstruct the persuasiveness of the second party's claims. So we, again, from President Obama, an example, Russia has justified these actions as an effort to prevent problems on its own borders and to protect ethnic Russians inside Ukraine. Of course, there is no evidence and never has been of a systematic violence against ethnic Russians inside of Ukraine. The other is strategic blaming. This strategy attributes blame or responsibilities for an event or action to an opponent. This strategy may be delivered in two ways: by attributing blame to an opponent for an action, that he is responsible for a bad or negative action, and just directly accusing him that he has done something wrong. So this strategy deconstruct or destabilize the image of the opponent. In international politics, a country may blame another country or its leader for an event or action. For example, the United States blaming Russia for the situation in Ukraine, or to accuse another country or its leader for an event or action that is commendable or threatening the international community. For example, Iraq for possessing weapons of mass destruction and hide them from the international community. And these are some examples, rhetorical examples. Again, Russia's violation of international law, for example, its assault on Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be met with condemnation. So it accuses basically Russia for violating international law, and attribution of blame accordingly is that, and yet as we gather here today, we know that this vision is threatened by Russia's aggression against Ukraine. It is a brazen assault on the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and it undermines an international order. So it attributes blame to Russia for what's happening in Ukraine. Of course, a very known and common strategy in character assassination is demonization. This is an act of speech used to create a very negative image of the enemy and to present him as particularly evil and inhumane characteristics, or even to identify him with the devil. So we can see an example here. The dictator of Iraq is a student of Stalin. Stalin has very negative characteristics as a personality, using murder as a tool of terror and control within his own cabinet, within his own army, and even within his own family. So we can see that a person is so bad and very bad, so like a demon, or as a demonization strategy can be part of a process of dehumanization.
Sorry, 1 minute and a half. Sorry, 1 minute and a half.
1 minute, great. Thank you very much. So the other one is also very common, the cornerstone, shall we say, of character assassination, which is the direct character attacks strategies, as they refer directly to the character or ethos of the opponent. In terms of international politics, those attacks refer to the leader of another country or the country itself when it functions as a rhetorical personification. The aim here is to deconstruct the character and dignity of the leader, as well as his ethics towards his people and the international society. They can be used or enriched through ad hominem arguments. And we can see here an example that Saddam Hussein and his regime plundered your nation's wealth, while many of you live in poverty. They lived lives in luxury. So he's a very unethical person. So he doesn't deserve you, is what practically he said. So here I finished, and I have for the presentation some annex we could see or share later, for perhaps for the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's quite interesting, and in fact, just using this opportunity as a chair of the panel, I do teach international relations, and I use maybe a couple of hours every semester to discuss the personal perspective and the way governments and organizations insult, attack, criticize other nations using personal attacks against their political leaders. It's a field which is really well accepted in political science, but not explored at all.
Yeah.
Only a few steps are taken. Thank you so much. It's a major step forward.
Thank you very much.
We can develop further, and this is something which has so many applications in today's politics. Look at what's going on in the relationship between the United States and France today, US and China, and Japan, and the political leaders are becoming more prominent figures used for public consumption and for attacks and for defenses. This is a huge subject, which will definitely attract attention of many government organizations and also non-government organizations. Let's talk further about that. This is a great subject, very promising. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So now we're moving on, and well, this will be now next presentation will be Alina Eremina, from Higher School of Economics in Moscow. I see higher means is just in Russian means excellence, emphasize excellence. And by the way, Higher School of Economics is one of the leading schools in Russia these days, just rankings and the quality of work they produced. And Anton Gumenskiy from Moscow State University, historically Moscow State, I would say Moscow Federal University, I think is the right translation. But Moscow State has been an elite leading school in Russia for many years. Well, just please, just well, that's the floor is yours. Welcome.
Great, thank you.
Let's see if you can share the screen.
Not yet.
Mm-hmm. So we are here, so you can see Zoom. Let's just take a few. So don't forget, after we finish the panels today, will be one more presentation. We'll do 1 and 2. Will be 2 ahead of us. We have a general discussion and exchange of opinions. I know it's a little bit late in Europe.
Dear colleagues, well, the system does not allow me to share the screen.
So who's ever currently
I cannot.
Who's ever currently sharing the screen needs to stop.
Yeah, maybe somebody should stop. If we can stop sharing the screen.
I suspect. Okay,
there we go.
Excellent.
There we go.
Now you should be able to. Thank you.
Yes, I am able now. Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Dear colleagues, I think you hear me well. Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this wonderful conference. So today we want to speak about cancel culture in Russia, new ethics versus traditional values. And today we want to speak about 3 cases. The first is connected with sexual harassment, another with domestic violence, and the third is about LGBT. So we will start with describing the cases. 2 cases are already familiar to you from the previous performances. So briefly, case of Regina Todorenko about domestic violence. She gave a video interview to the media People Talk. In this discussion regarding the increase in case of domestic violence due to restrictive measures related to the pandemic, Regina said, you need to be a psychologically sick person to say on camera, "My God, my husband beats me." After she was accused of supporting domestic violence, and she was brutally bullied in the social networks. So also such big companies as PepsiCo and Pampers stopped cooperating with her. The second case is about Vkusville, Russian healthy food product store. They posted in social media advertisement campaign, recipes for family happiness, and among other families' photos, there were one with where it was 2 homosexual women. This post this step caused positive reaction from the audience, Russian audience. But 5 days later, Vkusville apologized for these advertisements, and they deleted this post. And also they have another post where they write that it is a mistake that become manifestation of the unprofessionalism of the individual employees of the company. Thus, the campaign caused a negative reaction from the audience who accused it of being unable to resist governmental pressing. And the third case we wanted to speak about is case of Leonid Slutsky, a politician, deputy of State Duma of Russia. The sex scandal involving him appeared in 2018 in mass media. 3 women journalists, which work in State Duma, told to one of the most famous and independent Russian TV channel about sexual harassment by Slutsky. But there are no criminal or administrative penalties for harassment in Russia. So journalists appealed to the State Duma Commission of Ethics. to investigate the case, despite this fact that it was an evidence. Journalists prove dictaphone recording of a conversation in which Slutsky offered one of the women to become his mistress. The commission didn't find anything, and they say the violations of the behavior norms of the deputy is not found. The decision of the Ethics Commission caused criticisms among activists for equality as well as journalists. Several months after it was a process where important Russian media withdraw their journalists from the State Duma in protest against the Commission's decision. So we can trace a parallel here between this case and Harvey Weinstein scandal. Although Slutsky denied these accusations and still calling them as a provocation. Now I will give the word to my colleague.
Yes, thank you, Alina. And actually, the question here is there a pattern? Is there anything in common between these three cases of cancelling? So Regina was cancelled first, and then she apologized, and then she was praised and pardoned, and served all the compliments on the social media and on mass media. And of course, we'll have the food chain. It was cancelled first and then double cancelled. And it looked like, well, this cancelling worked so far. But Leonid Slutsky, member of parliament, well, actually, in his case, cancelling failed. And, he didn't suffer anything. And the coverage of this scandal was quite localized and quite short-term. So there was not a long tail of this story. So we can say that cancelling of Leonid Slutsky failed. And the question is why and how actually cancelling works and doesn't work in Russia. So we can apply several models here, several theoretical models, explanatory models. And first we can hypothesize that probably it is a matter of politics, of course. And as a matter of fact, reputation is something which actually does not really exist in Russia. And proximity, this is proximity to power, proximity to authorities, which holds the place of an absent institute of reputation in Russia. To have an institute of reputation, a social institute of reputation, you have to be able to delegate, to delegate trust and to delegate, actually, authority to delegate authority to have a reputation. You need to have a horizontal structure, not vertical structure, and you need to trust to your peer. And actually, one of the problems here might be that actually all these things related to trust and all the things related to security, for example, are delegated to authorities and to power and to let's say a collective Kremlin. So this is actually the relations to power, which holds the place of reputation. And the problem might be that the problem with these cases that Leonid Slutsky's cancelling failed, and of course will health chain cancel succeeded. So probably it is a matter of actually these relations to power. And of course, there can be speculations. Are there any direct and vocal instructions or recommendations or some explicit support from this so-called collective Kremlin to some specific actions of social groups? Or probably this is a kind of indirect and discreet and behind the curtain influence and manipulation of certain decisions being made by social groups and by probably paid trolls online and paid media probably. And of course, a concept of self-censorship can also be applied here. So bearing in mind this, well, support from Kremlin and direct or indirect influence and recommendations. So people start to self-censor themselves. And that might be a reason that, for example, Regina Todorenko was partly cancelled and our guy, Leonid Slutsky, was not. But that, to our mind, according to opinion of mine and my colleagues, that could be an oversimplification. So, and a concept of moral conflict could be quite more interesting here. And we could conceptualize canceling and cancel culture as a matter of moral conflict in Russia. So moral conflict represent the most uncompromising type of social conflicts. And we talk here about moral differences resulting from opposing worldviews or different social realities. So opposing worldviews and different social realities is something, quite more serious and more fundamental than just a political influence. Well, probably. And during moral conflicts, each ideological camp attempts to reaffirm its legitimacy and simultaneously questions the value systems of their opponents. So the value systems of their opponents. Cancel culture in Russia can be conceptualized actually as an object of this moral conflict. Cancel culture, is perceived as if it is being a part of new ethics, and it comes in packaged with new ethics, and it comes as a kind of cultural input to Russia from the West. So it is obvious, one can clearly see this, that scandals related to Slutsky, for example, and to Regina. Those the coverages of those conflicts are quite localized in in particular mass media, and mostly it is so-called liberal and Western globally oriented mass media. And for example, here on our slide, Slutsky is saying like this. So odd that they couldn't find some Americans to accuse me of this, Ukrainians or Americans. And actually those journalists, female journalists who accused Slutsky of sexual harassment, well, they used to work, they are working in BBC Russia news service and in Medusa news service and on Silver Rain TV station. So those media covered mostly this scandal with Slutsky, and we see that it is exactly so-called liberal and globally oriented mass media and social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook, which cover cancel culture cases mostly in Russia. And cancel culture is associated with the Western values and belongs to two codependent discourses.
Anton, if I may, sorry, 2 minutes.
Yes.
Sorry, to discourse. I'm really sorry. Humbly apologize. Please, just
No,
2 minutes, but you can
2 minutes. Great, great.
You.
So, and the first discourse is progressivist, westernized discourse. Of course, cancel culture, well, canceling. And the second discourse is traditionalist discourse. So it is two discourses and two major stories which discuss cancel culture. And one discourse is progressivist, and the second discourse is traditionalist. This is traditionalists who discuss canceling and cancel culture and new ethics a lot. And yes, these discourses are codependent. And cancel culture is perceived, as I said, as a part of new ethics. So it is not just a separate phenomenon, but is perceived as a part of new ethics and a cultural input from the West, and a product and a symbol about the Western cultural domination and West's attempts to destroy the Russian traditional values. And of course, here we talk about imagined West values and imagined Russian traditional values. So a constructivism paradigm, well, should surely be applied here. So, and the final two options, or the final question which arises here, is this conflict, is this cultural conflict of which cancel culture is the object and this center probably, is this conflict objective and so somehow natural for the Russian society? Is it natural? Is it, well, real? Or is it solely and completely imposed and cultivated by the state propaganda? And actually, in our small, group, my colleagues, our opinions, some of us says the responsibility of the state propaganda. Well, and I often think that and you cannot just apply propaganda and use propaganda against a population and then hope that this population will be, well, free of those opinions and values which were imposed on them. The problem here is a bit more serious than just political influence and political attempts to defund this guy, who's, well, a member of political establishment. So this is, well, unfortunately, I mean, a bit more serious political influence and political propaganda. Probably this conflict is somehow objective and yes, natural. And cancel culture is being perceived as a part of this conflict and as an object of this conflict, and being perceived as a part of Western destroying influence in Russia. Well, that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alina. Thank you, Anton. I just quickly add as a footnote. Sorry for this, just a footnote. But some of my colleagues, just this eye-opening presentation. Thank you so much. I'm really impressed. Some of my colleagues told me, well, there's no independent science coming from Russia. There's no really sound science. That's an example of independent, sound science-based argument. And just I really applaud. And just again, this is what I want to say, that this is a great presentation and so eye-opening in so many ways. And I definitely have many questions, but I didn't have a chance to type it. But I will ask. So thank you so much once again. And as a final presentation for today, I would like to introduce Professor Josh Compton and Daniel Lam from Dartmouth College. I cannot imagine how wonderful this late September in New Hampshire is. I can't imagine. I've been there a couple of times, but I think it's the best time of the year in New Hampshire. Josh Compton is known not for just being in a wonderful environment right there in New Hampshire and Dartmouth College, one of the best schools in the world, but also he is a specialist who studies, if I put my own way, the personal immunization against fake news, against propaganda, against information which can be harmful. The question that Josh studies is how do we develop this immunization, psychological, cognitive, behavioral. This is a great type of studies. Exactly, it's just a wonderful fit to the studies of character assassination and cancel culture. And Daniel Lam, as we know, this is a specialist in media. He is a professional, and he knows a lot about media, and definitely more than we know. And just, gentlemen, this is the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will begin to share my screen now. Thank you to the conference organizers and to the attendees. I'm Daniel. I'm an undergraduate senior at Dartmouth College, and I worked on this paper and presentation with my colleague Josh Compton here, who has joined me on this panel. I will run through the slides, and at the end, Professor Compton may jump in just as we transition into the Q&A, as we are now at the bottom end of this panel. Professor Compton, did you want to say anything before I begin the slides?
No, thanks, Daniel. Take it away.
Wonderful. All right. I first want to draw everyone's attention to these two images up on the screen now. On the right, we have Italian painter Vincenzo Camuccini's The Death of Julius Caesar. And while it may seem like a very appropriate image for a conference on assassination, there is, of course, a major difference. Unlike the assassinations of Caesar or Mahatma Gandhi or earlier this year, Jovenel Moïse, there is no bloodshed in the assassinations that we examine. And of course, that is because it's a metaphor. And not only do Professor Compton and I join you from the wonderful mountains of New Hampshire, we join you from the wonderful world of inoculation theory, hence the image on the left. Another rhetorical strategy predicated on a metaphor. And so today our presentation is mixing metaphors, the analogics of inoculation theory, and character assassination. To begin with a primer on inoculation theory, it is, of course, as the name suggests, a preventative measure. It is preventing a healthy state from being persuaded in an undesirable direction, just as a medical inoculation, as pictured here, prevents the healthy body from a virus. As Compton and Pfau described it in 2005, individuals can be inoculated against future there we go. Individuals can be inoculated against future attitude attacks in much the same way individuals can be inoculated against future viral attacks. There's some very important components of inoculation that make it work, the first of which is threat. The individual has to perceive that their established healthy state is going to come under threat. As described by Compton in 2013, it's a recognized vulnerability, a perception that an existing position, which we also refer to as the healthy state, once thought safe from change, may now be at risk. And then there's preemption. Just like with medical vaccines, the inoculation theory, when used in a rhetorical sense, is a preventative measure. It's done before the individual adopts what is the undesirable opinion. As Compton describes again in 2013, refutational pretreatments raise persuasive challenges or counterarguments, arguments that challenge the existing positions, beliefs, or attitudes, the same positions, beliefs, and attitudes that we are trying to protect. These counterarguments are weakened by refutations. Just like with a medical vaccine that might entail a weakened strain of a virus, the counterarguments are presented with refutations so the individual is prepared to fend off future attacks. And with the COVID-19 vaccines bringing rise to more mRNA-based vaccines, it's pretty much the same. The mRNA, while not a weakened version of the virus, still equips the individual with the tools necessary to fend off any future attacks. Now, let's think about the analogy. It's been described as the theoretical point of departure, a guideline, the biological analogy that provides its guiding logic, what bore the burden of explaining inoculation, and it's intended to serve as the theoretical springboard for further investigations. And if that sounds like a lot, it's because it is. As we argue, these analogies, these metaphors are doing quite a lot. As Compton describes it, the analogy does more than just name the process of resistance, it explains it. Now, to bring back character assassination. Of course, as two of our conference conveners described it, it's the deliberate destruction of an individual's reputation. Now let's think about it in the analog. In terms of the language that's being used, a lot of it is being informed by the use of that very term assassination, which necessarily carries with it connotations of things like lethality, finality, irreparable damage. Language such as inflicting a wound, healing a wound, struck a death blow, as written by Coombs and Holliday, are reflections of the way the metaphor informs the way we as scholars and researchers are thinking about character assassination. And in turn, of course, the way we think about it affects the way we write about it, which in turn affects the way the public understands character assassination. To bring inoculation theory back into this, Compton in 2013 describes the utility of the analogy as having both helped and hindered inoculation research, and he argues it continues to do both, and we would argue 8 years later, it still does. The conveners of this conference, to quote again, warned us just last year not to take the term assassination too literally. Taken together, these statements both suggest a certain tension, a tension between the utility and the benefits of these analogies and certain drawbacks. However, we do argue that the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. But to start, let's go over the benefits. We identified 3 benefits of inoculation theory's metaphor that are the same benefits to the metaphor used in character assassination. For one, these analogies offer a heuristic value. For students like me, for researchers, for scholars, it helps us understand what is it we're talking about. For one, with inoculation theory, we understand that we're talking about resisting attacks. That's the goal. It requires pre-exposure to weakened versions of those attacks. That's the mechanism by which the theory works. And we understand that for it to happen, there's a necessary catalyst. The catalyst, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is the elicitation of threat. As for character assassination, we understand what's at stake. It's credibility, its reputation. And then we understand the magnitude of those stakes, as indicated by the part of assassination. It could be entirely someone's reputation, and therefore the stakes are not just high, they are potentially the highest they can be. Again, as I mentioned earlier, ideas of finality and irreparable harm. The second benefit we identified is that the analogies define the theories. They set the guardrails. They tell us what is and what is not inoculation theory, what is and what is not character assassination. As for inoculation theory in particular, we understand that it is a preventative strategy. It is preemptive. It is not done after the person has, not traditionally done after the person has already adopted the undesirable viewpoint, and it is used to protect a healthy state, just as a vaccine in medicine is used to protect the healthy body. As for character assassination, we understand from the analogy that we're dealing with a damaged or maybe even completely damaged reputation. And it indicates that there are degrees of offensiveness and responsibility associated with the relevant actions to commit that character assassination. Finally, the last benefit that we identify across both of these analogies is that they can guide future research and theorizing. With COVID-19 bringing vaccines into the mainstream discourse, for example, we know that there's a lot of discussion of booster shots or third doses, and that has many applications in inoculation theory. While inoculation theory already has a mechanism to keep promoting the strength of the defenses after the treatment, it's known as post-inoculation talk. For example, when the subject goes to a friend or a colleague and says, hey, I heard about these counter arguments. This is what I think. What do you think? That's known as post-inoculation talk, or PIT. But what about another inoculation treatment, like another shot in the arm? That's certainly an area of future research that is derived from the fact that we are working off a medical analog. As for character assassination, thinking about the different ways a physical, deadly assassination can occur has helped us understand the different ways a character assassination can occur. Take, for example, the differences between individual and collective character assassinations, between live and post-mortem assassinations, or between spontaneous and planned assassinations, the latter of which is pretty important nowadays given how social media has permeated our daily lives. And that brings me to two drawbacks. Again, two that we identify in both character assassination and inoculation theory. The first is that these analogies may be limiting research, perhaps inadvertently. For inoculation theory, we know that much of the conventional wisdom indicates the optimal time delay between the inoculation and the attack is 2 weeks. Coincidentally, that also seems to be the optimal delay for full strength of the COVID-19 vaccine. But in 2010, a meta-analysis by Banis and Rains failed to confirm that very fact. And so it leads to the question, how much research has potentially been hindered or dissuaded that would have looked at efficacy of inoculation at either shorter or longer timeframes? As for character assassination, varying definitions lead to a bit of confusion. Some definitions include premeditation as a requisite component of assassination, and some do not, hence the existence of drive-by or spontaneous assassinations. And like I mentioned just a little bit before, social media, having permeated our lives, demands that we examine this phenomenon even more. The second drawback of the analogy that we've identified is that the analogies may be misdefining the theories a little bit. To begin with inoculation theory, Wood in 2007 found that inoculation theory may in fact have therapeutic, not just prophylactic potential. In other words, inoculation may still be used even after the individual has adopted the point of view that we don't want them to adopt. Clinging to this idea of inoculation theory as strictly a prophylactic treatment may be inhibiting research into its uses in refutational different, or excuse me, not refutational different attacks, but in prophylactic and therapeutic applications, excuse me there. As for character assassination, Kasher and Yadlin in 2005 put it best when they said the term assassination is not an innocent word. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it carries with it necessarily certain negative connotations. And just as a panelist or an attendee mentioned earlier during panel 1 this morning, it brings up questions of moral or even legal concern. And as Dr. Shiraev mentioned earlier today as well, it potentially brings up a normative assessment when one is not necessarily warranted. Essentially, we argue these commonalities of benefits and drawbacks are the same with both inoculation theory and character assassination. On balance, though, we contend that the benefits do outweigh the costs. In both instances, we do argue that the analogies are flexible enough if we broaden our conceptualization of what are the targets and what are the bases. What is inoculation? What is not inoculation? And what is character assassination? And what is not character assassination? More often than not, we contend a broader view of the targets and bases in the analogics of both inoculation theory and character assassination will reveal connections that not only keep the analogy consistent, as I mentioned before, the guardrails, but additionally lead to more cohesive programs of study in these respective areas. Again, furthering research, perhaps at conferences just like these. Thank you. Professor Compton, did you want to jump in with anything there?
Thank you so much. Yes, yeah, sorry, please go ahead.
No, you said it all, Daniel. I'm happy to jump in during the Q&A if anybody has any specific follow-up questions.
Absolutely, this is wonderful, dynamic, structured, really right to the points, and so well organized. Again, thank you so much. It's wonderful. We are perfect on time. So in the East Coast is 3:24, 3:25, and Europe is evening, and we know this to get some time. And I think that we can even overlap with our general discussion. And Dr. Samoilenko, Serge, you can just also take it over. We can do it together just to address the questions that have been typed and questions that's just we can ask. And therefore, I have Martin has a question. Yes, please go ahead, Martin.
I'll let Michael Dudley go first.
Okay, Michael, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Really interesting, fascinating presentation. I'd not heard of inoculation theory before. It sounds very promising. I'm just a little unclear though about what it means. Like if I think an example would help. Like, are you talking about trying to prevent someone from gaining a problematic idea or expressing it? How would that work? And you said something about, you know, preventing them from having an idea we don't want them to have. And I guess that was kind of problematic. And I typed in the comments, who's we? Who are we to decide what ideas other people are gonna have? So if you could flesh that out a little, please, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Sure. Daniel, do you want me to take this one?
Sure, you can begin.
Okay, great. So thanks for that question. Inoculation theory, like many of the theories from social psychology, is a value neutral theory. So it can certainly be used for harm. In fact, you can look at some of the most common conventional methods that cults use to indoctrinate individuals, follows very closely to the inoculation theory tenets, but it can also be used for a lot of social good. And that's what many of the people who are using the applied inoculation are doing that for. So let me give you one example. One of the best ways to think about inoculation theory is in contrast to one directional anti-drug or anti-drinking campaigns. We can think about throughout the 1980s, the Just Say No campaign, which did a really nice job with a really clear, concise message of just saying no, but a really awful job if you want to measure it based on if it actually worked or not, right? One of the reasons why the Just Say No campaign didn't work, we now know post hoc, is because it did not deal with any of the potential counter arguments that kids were going to be facing as to why they should say yes. So they weren't prepared. They had what we might call a paper tiger effect, where they thought that they would never smoke or they thought that they would never drink, but that's only because they had never been challenged. They had been kept in this aseptic environment, right, to remain healthy. Inoculation theory would say, before you encounter those stronger challenges later, you should bring up some of those challenges and then refute them on your own, a two-sided message approach. So people using inoculation theory would go into the school system and say, you think right now, right, talking to like sixth graders, right? Research shows that like 88% or so of sixth graders say that they would never even imagine trying smoking, right? You might think that you're never going to smoke, and you're absolutely right. You should not. However, you're going to hear some really good arguments over the next few years that might actually make you question your position there. For instance, people are going to tell you that smoking will relax you. It'll be a nice stress reducer. But actually think about how stressful it's going to be when you have to sneak around to find the cigarettes, when you have to hide the smell on your clothes from your parents, etc. So that's taking a little virus, smoking will relax you, and then refuting it with reputations, much the same way if we look at a conventional flu shot, is taking a little piece of flu, weakening it to motivate your body to produce antibodies. So that's the basic format for inoculation. It's been used since early 1960s in health, in politics, public relations, marketing, science communication, and the list goes on and on. So it certainly has been put into good social use, but you're right, the we matters. It can certainly be misused too. So whenever we say a harmful idea, we're saying from the mind of the campaign designer, which we hope is a good idea, we are trying to avoid this bad idea from taking place.
And also just to touch upon quickly the we aspect. After all, I did say that. Absolutely right. You know, as I mentioned, I think partway through, about halfway through, we are not trying to impose normative assessments here of what we think is good, what we think is bad. I was actually using the we from the sense of a researcher designing a study in terms of, you know, coming up with the treatment that we were going to give the subjects, and then identifying beforehand the boundaries of this is what we don't want them to be persuaded to believe, and this is what we believe the healthy state to be. But absolutely right. Thank you for that question, Michael.
Thank you, Daniel. Dr. Compton, Josh, thank you so much. And there will be more questions, but I see Martin X. Martin, please, just your question. He's in Netherlands.
Yeah, well, I have two actually. A quick question to Josh and Daniel, because we've the term character assassination has certainly given us headaches, and we've thought long and hard about whether to use it or not. And we eventually went with it because at least it was a word that people recognize and it said something to them. So it made me wonder if you've ever considered any alternatives to inoculation theory, and if so, what they were. And I also have a question to Tony. In your presentation, you talk about character assassination of nations. Could you reflect a bit on national character and to what extent you can compare a national character to an individual character?
I can give a really simple answer. Thank you for that question about whether or not I've thought of alternatives to inoculation. No, I love the analogy on which inoculation theory is based. I think that it's not only cute and clever, but 100% accurate. And in fact, I would argue that a lot of the missteps we've taken over the last 60 years with this theory is because we've treated the analogy as mere rhetorical flourish, and not actually looked at the actual logic in the analogic. And when we've done that, we've completely taken some missteps with it. So I'm a defender of the analogy.
Yeah, very clear. Thank you. Yeah. Tony?
Yeah, sorry, I had my microphone closed. Well, I saw also I read the comments that you all mentioned during my presentation. So I would say that in international politics, there is a connection, shall we say, of the two levels of analysis, which is the one is the state level and the other is the individual level. Which is, of course, that of the political leaders. So we cannot say that by attacking an individual leader's character, that always that reflects on the nation. So I would say that in the international politics, it's always has to do about goals and objectives, and what is the goal of what we want to achieve every time. But a political leader always bears the nation behind him. So he's not just a figure like it happens in domestic politics. When politicians in domestic politics attack themselves and assassinate their characters, then they are just there as personalities. But in the national level, there is the state behind that. So when we do that, when we attack those characters, then we might also attack the image of the nation. And this is, as I said, associated with the goals that one nation may have. And let me say this in order to perhaps enlighten you more on that. The difference between the two case studies I studied in of Iraq and Ukraine was that the Iraq war was a goal to destroy basically the regime of Saddam Hussein and make a new regime out of the state of Iraq, in the state of Iraq. That was not the case, however, in the Ukraine crisis. And we can see there that there was not a direct attack either on the character or on the leader of Russia, which was Putin, which is Putin practically at the time. So he didn't want to destroy the leader's image and reputation, and through that also the country. He wanted just to bring the country to the right track again. And that was, President Obama always mentioned Russia and not the leader, the name of the leader. And this usually happens when we refer to the interstate character assassination level, when we refer to the level we want to achieve. The leader, we name the leader, as did, for example, President Bush in the Iraq case. He mentioned directly Saddam Hussein and Iraq, and he also made direct connections between Iraq and Saddam Hussein, that it was the same person, the same thing, shall we say. So, and this is, that happens because through the process of personification, and I think there were some comments on that also, through the process of personification, sometimes the reader identifies, even in the Western context, with the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you for clarifying. Dr. Samoilenko, Serge, you have a question, but you can also take it over.
Yeah, I actually have two. Just a comment to Tony's response. Well, in sociology, basically, like in Goffman's tradition, so character is known as public image. So when we refer to character, when in a more broader social context, we refer to face or to public image of a particular social entity. So that's perfectly fine to use it as synonyms in the sociological context. So I have a question to Josh. He had a beautiful chapter in our handbook of character assassination and reputation management, where he talked about inoculation against character assassination and as character assassination. Can you provide an example of using inoculation as character assassination? How can you challenge someone through inoculation?
Yeah, maybe one good example would be if you think about this in a legal context. So how about if counsel would make the argument that you're going to hear a lot of good things that so-and-so has done, a lot of accomplishments, a lot of successes, a lot of positive attributes. However, do not let that cloud from the fact that this act was very wrong. This act was illegal. This act was whatever, right? So in that sense, you are taking their positive attributes and actually turning that into a virus, right? And then refuting it with the weakening version, right? And so you are inoculating against having a positive perception of this person's character based on taking their best attributes and then tearing them apart beforehand. And I should note here too that inoculation theory originated with William McGuire, the social psychologist in the 1960s, but it goes back way farther than that. I mean, we can look at some writings from Aristotle, who argued that the best way to beat your opponent's argument is to rip apart their arguments before they have a chance to make them. And so that's the same basic logic at work there too.
Josh, I think in rhetoric it's kind of similar, is poisoning the well, right? So attacking somebody ahead of time by giving small doses of poison to basically kind of pollute the discourse, right?
Yeah, yeah, and and there's also that that concept of what's it called, Mithridatism from ancient Greece, where you give a little bit of poison, a little bit at a time, and build up immunity from it, or a better example, they use it in Princess Bride, right? I mean, that's how he was able to drink the poison and still go, because he built up immunity to it by taking a little bit of poison a little bit at a time. And there's some basic parallels there too. That's why it's such a cool analogy, right? I mean, it's timeless.
That's a cool analogy. Yeah, absolutely. I'll borrow it. So we do have some questions which were in chat, and April asked a question, and I think it was addressed to just let me know who was that. And I quote, "I have the same question as Michael Dudley," and I quote, "Who is making the judgment about the views that the vaccine should not update?" So who is making the judgment about the views the vaccine should not be updated? So April can just maybe jump in and just correct me if I misinterpreted the question or misdirected it.
Sorry, no. It was Martin's question, and Josh and Daniel have already addressed it perfectly. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes, excellent. So anybody just could jump in. Any questions or comments? I do have a question. Just maybe quick comment and question. The presentation, Alina and Anton, about Russian culture. You mentioned about the agenda or frame that was presented for the arguments about LGBT rights, about liberalism, about human rights and everything else as something foreign, sort of like a poison coming from the West to Russian culture. Once again, I put it as a square, like a frame. But just this is I think tell me if you agree with me, it's a sort of an example of how a government can frame a certain message in certain topic to convert it and install like a software in people's minds. And governments have more and more power to do that everywhere in the world. Depends on structure, depends on type of democracy, depends type of government, by the way. But this is what's happening. Once again, it was not the people, that the government and the president himself installed this message, or at least try to install the frame message in that particular way. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Probably I shall start, and Alina will add something if she wants. Since it's been explained, I mean that yes, it is obviously a framing from the side of the government and state-owned. This is a framing made by state-owned mass media. I agree. But, on the other hand, it is a convenient framing. It is a convenient way of thinking that, convenient for grassroots, convenient for peers, convenient for, ordinary, so-called ordinary users and social media platform users. It is a convenient framing, convenient way of thinking that we are different, that we have something our own, that we really think that there should exist things like right things and wrong things, like something correct and something not correct. And this is not gradually, it is becoming not only the framing from the government and the state-owned mass media, but also it is a way how a normal Runet user, Russian social media platforms users used to think and are being used to think. So that's why I think that it is not only the propaganda thing, that it is not only a matter of political influence, but also this propaganda is perceived, and those seeds come on a very thankful soil. These seeds are going into soil, and then they grow into a perception of a Russian culture as something special and something normal, something correct and right and natural.
Good point. Yes, it's natural. Yes, something that just comes from nature. This is this reality, and everything else is something else. But
a very essentialistic way of thinking. Yes, correct.
Yes, a very good point. And we look in history, and Martin, correct me if I'm wrong, that many governments in the past used the idea of, the essentialistic idea suggesting that we are natural and everything things foreign are poisonous to the body of our nation is quite an essential argument of many governments. Look at, I hate those examples, but simply by definition, but this is what Mussolini argued about the fascist culture in Italy. This is what Nazi propaganda argued about, the poison coming from inside the body of Germany and outside of the body of Germany. I hate to say this again, but the Chinese government just argues that there's a natural, essential things Chinese, and then something is artificial, foreign, and it must be resisted. And therefore, cancel culture is just used, or cancel culture mechanism used to defend, quote unquote, the body of the nation from.
That metaphor already goes back to antiquity.
Well, please go ahead.
The Romans already talk about the nation as a body.
Oh, there we go. Nation is a body, and there's a metaphor And metaphor becomes a powerful force because it penetrates people's minds and just affects their actions.
Yeah, something is healthy and something is destructive, not healthy. Yes, well, I agree.
And I have a question about inoculation theory.
Eric, maybe we should let Alina respond because
yes, go ahead. Certainly, please.
Oh, I think I have nothing to change after this kind of good discussion. Every participant say, really, I agree. Thank you very much.
And guys, thank you so much for your research. I know it's not very easy for you to do research and speak independently, but you're true researchers, and thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The question about inoculation theory is that, is it possible to assume that some people are born to resist any influence that they consider inappropriate or forced upon them by parents and schools and the system? And some of us are naturally just go with the flow. That's it. It's just whatever it said. It's like a sponge. I accept everything, and that's fine. And maybe this is a component. Yes, it's based on socialization, but maybe some people are just throughout their lives are prepared to be sponges and follow with the flow. And some of us are rebels. We go and demonstrate. We go and rally. We go and petition. We go and disagree. And we become those who try to silence others because we disagree with the, say, mainstream message or whatever. So inoculation theory, just if any comments on that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Thank you. We have, throughout the last few decades, inoculation scholars have tried to tease out whether or not there are demographic differences when it comes to psychological traits or other demographics in whether or not inoculation works better or worse. We've looked at issues of gender and age, need for cognition. But one of the more interesting turns speaks closer to what you were just asking about, and that's this concept of psychological reactance. And so we know that whenever someone's trying to take our freedom from us, or we think that they are, the best way that we can rebel against that is to do the very thing that we're being told not to do, or vice versa. We know that that's highest according to a good deal of developmental research at the preteen age and elderly age, right? Because freedoms are becoming more and more common for the pre-teenagers. And so they value them more because they've been restricted for so long. And so they hold tighter to them, and the opposite at the other end of our life. But here's what I was going to bring inoculation theory back in. We found that you could actually inoculate against psychological reactants. So we could warn you that you're going to be tempted to reject this message because of psychological reactance theory. And by warning people about reactants, you can inoculate against it. And we found that you can inoculate with psychological reactants. And this goes back to Serge's question earlier. You can actually not only say, here's what they're going to tell you, and here's why they're wrong. You can say, here's what they're going to tell you, here's why they're wrong, and here's how they're trying to take away your choice in this situation. So you can actually turbocharge psychological reactants and use that for the betterment of the campaign designer. Is that great? Well, it depends on what the intentions of the campaign designer are, right? It can be terrifying to think that somebody's taking this natural inclination that we have toward resisting persuasion and turbocharging it whenever it would be in much better interest to not, right? All the more reason to better understand inoculation theory, because like Daniel was saying earlier, we're not arguing that everybody should be using inoculation theory. We're arguing that everybody is using inoculation theory, whether we see it or not. And so that's all the more reason to understand how it's working, where it's working, when it's working, and what we can do about it. And like I said over in the comments, you can inoculate against inoculation too, and that gets super messy.
Yes,
it works.
Thank you, Josh. Josh Compton from Dartmouth. And Serge, you have a question or comment? Sorry.
I have a basically response to Josh. I know Bill Maher uses inoculation all the time in his shows. There was this famous video on YouTube when he took on like John Klein. And at the end he said, well, they might tell you that, I had too much weed and I kind of belong to Hollywood elite, and blah, blah, blah about me, but it's not about me. So it's your choice what you think about John Klein, right? So basically he's inoculating against potential kind of attacks about his like reputation and, you know, what people say about him. And then he say, well, but now you think, you know, whatever you want about John Klein and make your own personal decision. Yeah, fascinating. So I just have one question to Nikolai about the future of sociology of character assassination. So you really presented a lot of interesting ideas about the methodology and different approaches. So what's next? What's the future of your research, and how do you think you're going to apply it?
I think the next thing is to create the kind of a classification of real methods of how we can use it and to test it on some of them. I guess it's going to be an in-depth interviews with people or an expert interview about character assassination, because as I'm finishing my PhD this year, I guess that is going to be my final paper. So next steps is to exactly use one of the types of character assassination. I think is going to be silencing plus in-depth interviews of how people would react to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a next question. Maybe just we heard several times, but this was in a passing way, and maybe we'll address it tomorrow. But is there and Jenny, maybe just you can just follow up on this. Is there a gender bias in silencing in cancel culture? So just what are the biases that we gender biases we witness, at least just from your standpoint as an observer, as a professional, by the way? Is it about what kind of things that may be prevalent when people attack women and cancel them, or it's just basically random distribution just in terms of gender characteristics?
Well, I'm certainly not the best person to answer that question. It seems like Amy's research that she presented in the last panel about her sort of the empirical study that she was running about that is the best way to answer that question. I do think, you know, we talked briefly about public apologies and to what extent public apologies are accepted or seen as some type of charades. And I do think some of our panelists on the other panel talked a little bit about you know, some of the structural gender-based discourses that allow us to create this narrative of the reformed bad boy, and so we get to celebrate someone who has been canceled and welcome them back into the public sphere. But you know, this Justin Bieber figure who used to get in drunken fights and now he's okay. Women don't have access to that same reform narrative, and so I think when we think about public image and the way it's represented in the media in particular, there's certainly a whole host of ways that we don't have quite the same narratives that we want to draw on where women who have been canceled are concerned. But I certainly don't have the empirical data on that. It's you know, some of the panelists that were talking earlier today were getting into that with their research. So I think we should all wait at the edge of our seats to see what they come up with. But certainly dominant cultural narratives are different for women. And as a result, things like public apologies and the idea of being reformed from having made mistakes don't work the same way for women. So I don't want to cut this conversation off, but I do want to, because I see that we have some other people with hands up, but I do want to touch base with Serge and ask what you want to do here.
Well, basically, we had a bunch of people who left and some new people who joined. I wanted to hear from people who didn't have a chance to speak today and maybe ask some questions. And I also wanted to get back to our framing questions, at least 3 framing questions that I think we need to kind of talk about today. And and those questions would be.
Can I just say then,
yeah.
I just know that people have a million other things going on in their lives. So I'm going to officially declare panel 5 over. And so, if you were a presenter on panel 5, we will likely still continue to talk about your work in your absence, but you are officially dismissed. And for those of you all who are going to hang around for some more networking and conversation, then I would say, let's keep the conversation going. But I don't want anyone to feel like they are trapped in this Zoom room with us until we shut up. So
well, and it's late in Russia and Greece.
Yes.
And no extra credit for presence for being here.
But as I suspect some people may jump off the meeting now, I'll just say again, thank you so much for the wonderful presentations and all of that good stuff. So yay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This just goes back to the question that Jennifer had to deal with in terms of gender. Is I wonder if part of the reason that there are differences is that women don't engage in a lot of the power moves that men engage in that get them in trouble. And so, or that would be interpreted that way. You don't have a similar kind of Me Too movement among men, being sexually harassed, because that's the power thing that men are most often engaged in. And also there are behaviors that probably wouldn't be interpreted the same way in terms of gender. The other day there was a New York Times editorial by a former producer at ABC News in which she had been, this was back, I think, 2004, 2005, at a party where Chris Cuomo, who had been, she had been his boss and now was no longer going to be. He comes up to her at this party, hugs her with one arm, and then grabs her ass with the other. And he was basically kind of, his defense was, well, I was kind of doing this, to show that you were no longer my boss. Well, what would have happened if she had come in, and the flip situation, had hugged him with one arm and grabbed his ass with the other? Would have been interpreted the same way in terms of, a use of power? I don't know. Probably not. Certainly not in 2004, 2005. That would probably been that's a ballsy move by a woman. So I was just wanted to raise that in terms of why there may be some gender differences, is because I think there are gender differences in both the execution of some of these bad acts as well as the interpretation of them.
Yeah, I think your point is well taken, Rod, and one of the things that we, as we've started or since we've been studying character assassination, have tried to emphasize is that all of these attacks and behaviors and communication broadly are understood within gendered and racialized systems, and those systems are big and they go back a long time. And I think you're right that we tend not to view women's actions in the same way that they can be seen as threatening and that kind of thing. Although I think you're right that this is changing, but it's a useful reminder that it's important to take into account these structural social contexts in which all of this behavior occurs. And I think certainly, how quick we are to forgive people and all of that good stuff is a really interesting and fruitful area for further inquiry. And I really can't wait to see what Amy's study shows when she gets the numbers crunched.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm really happy that this conference is actually posing a lot of interesting questions, obviously, and that's exactly what we need to do as researchers to kind of generate more insight and more interesting ideas. So this is ongoing research, which will be hopefully potentially replicable. So I know we have a bunch of people here who didn't have a chance to say anything or speak up. We have several observers here, and so I would like to give them the floor and maybe invite them to join the conversation and maybe share their opinion and impressions of this conference, about things they have learned, about some major takeaways, and maybe some teachable moments and lessons learned at the end of the day. And maybe you can link it to those 3 points, 3 framing questions I selected from the list that we posted yesterday. So in your opinion, so based on what we talked about today and what you know now about character assassination and cancel culture, is being canceled a form of character assassination? Is it all about character, or this is more to the conversation, just public reputation? So what does it mean to say you've been canceled? And what is the rhetorical impact of claiming to be canceled? And maybe somebody would like to kind of think out loud about that.
I just hop in here with a thought. It seems like what happens with instances of cancel culture is people whom otherwise have previously been popular and thought of in a certain way, they say something or act in a certain way, and suddenly all that matters is how that action is perceived and talked about and understood, and in some cases mischaracterized. And actually, the character of that individual doesn't seem to matter anymore. You know, it doesn't matter that they were beloved for who they were, and now all people can talk about is this one thing that they said, and suddenly they are no longer a good person. So in a way, character assassination it seems to be a bit of a misnomer, because it really does seem to be about actions and perceptions about them. And and that person's speech acts, I guess, is more accurate. Things they've written, things they've said, which then becomes conflated with what their character must be, regardless of what we used to think about them. So
right. So Michael, and that's why we refer to character as a perceived character sometimes, and we point out the importance of context. So it's really important of the situational perception of character in a particular moment. Jennifer.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, I think it, like being canceled or you know, having or I guess I should say being canceled, to me, it seems like is fundamentally about character. But I see the move you're making, Michael. I think what happens when people get canceled is our perception of their character gets collapsed into one particular event or thing that they've said. And that one thing becomes the overwhelming way that the public understands their character. And past actions, past philanthropy, past great thing becomes completely subverted by this one other particular thing. And so I think that really then speaks to what Emily from Pew Research was saying this morning, which is you can understand then how some people might see that as undue punishment as opposed to holding people accountable for a particular thing that they've done or said. But, you know, certainly whether it's sort of racist or sexist or anti-Semitic type claims that end up coming out, I think what cancel culture does, or what the move to cancel someone does, is collapse their entire character into this one thing. And so we often talk, as we've classified the different modes of character attacks in the work that we've done, identified strategies like labeling, which are common rhetorical maneuvers. And you know, and Tony talked a little bit about some of the ways that those work in international relations today too. But so it's easy then to collapse the character into one thing, add that label onto it, and that becomes the public perception of character that's easy to retweet and circulate. And that becomes the story, as opposed to other perhaps more nuanced understandings of a person's character. I guess those are my original thoughts.
And this is true, and actually scholars don't agree on character and reputational attacks. For example, Douglas Walton, when he talked about public character, he spoke about those fateful moments that basically can destroy character at one instance, and nothing else matters, and people don't remember your accomplishments and all these great things you've done in the past. What really matters is what you did right now, what you said. And there is another line of research that talks about basically reputation as a social asset that you build it and turns into your symbolic and social capital. And all these character attacks kind of like they kind of deplete drop by drop your character until you totally exhaust it. And so which one is right, we don't know, because I guess it's contextually, it depends on lots of different variables and circumstances, whether it's political context, whether it's a corporate context, whether it's about attacks on celebrities. It all depends. And that's the beauty of our scholarship. Rod, you have a comment. Please unmute yourself.
Want to go back to what Michael was saying about, how, you can have a really good character, and then all of a sudden there'll be one thing that will, put it into doubt. And I was thinking this summer, Felicia Rashad had taken over as Dean of Fine Arts at Howard. And, she has had an extremely, good reputation over a number of years, both in the theater industry and outside of it, and that was seen as a big move for Howard to get her as dean, and then to follow that up with Nicole Hannah-Jones and Ta-Nehisi Coates was kind of a big year. But then Bill Cosby ends up getting released from jail. And she tweets out, her support. She's been a long time a friend of Bill Cosby. She had, in her tweet, she had made mention about it, kind of, it's about time, that had been, a great injustice. And people, especially a lot of students and some, donors at Howard wanted her out of the deanship, immediately. The interesting thing is that she was right. That had been a bad prosecution in terms of things that were violated in terms of practice, which is why he ended up getting out, despite the fact that the evidence was clearly overwhelmingly guilty. But that was like one incident of supporting a friend, not unlike what Sharon Osbourne was doing, with Piers Morgan, and then having people from all over wanting to basically cancel her for one thing, that the rest of her life and reputation didn't matter.
That's excellent, and you had a great example, by the way. Thanks for thinking of that. Eric, you have a comment.
Thank you, Serge. To follow up, just a simple thought experiment, just for the sake of experiment for all of us. Just imagine I have an agreement with a colleague of mine from a university in a country somewhere who would present a paper in our next conference at Dartmouth or University of Winnipeg or in Greece or, well, somewhere in our schools. And the paper will be based on research. And we clearly identify homophobic, racist, and stereotypical judgments from the paper. And for really biased. And will we invite this person next time to our conference? Will we ourselves be willing to give him, say it's a he, a floor to speak at our discussion? I think we will just have an agreement among us. We don't think that we need to have a smoke-filled room to discuss and, oh, let's cancel this person next time or this time. But we'll have understanding that, well, I don't think that a person isn't welcome if we think that his message is really homophobic and racist and sexist. And because we understand peer culture, peer reviews are brutal. We have been canceled so many times, speaking about cancellation by peer reviewers, and we don't think they're fair, right? But then we've been canceled by our fellow peers, and I was on those juries and continue to be. But still, we will judge this person is not really representing our ideas, and we'll cancel this individual. My question is, can we justify our legitimacy as peers to cancel somebody who we think is conveying a racist, homophobic, and sexist message?
Well, I think the answer is that so it depends again on the context. In some contexts, they have professional requirements and rules and agreements, and basically that person does not respect certain policies that are accepted in this particular social context, that person will be excluded regardless of what we think of that person personally. Because we are taught how to distinguish professional from private. And I think that's a really important distinction, of course. That's why when we talk about character, it's really important to talk not just about personal character, but also about the social function that character needs to play in society. And when a person is not able to adjust or adapt to particular requirements or policies or rules, that person actually will face some consequences, regardless of some other qualities, regardless of whether the person is a great father, wonderful husband, and a just reliable friend, right? So, and that's why it's really important. And I think the same Doug Walton talked about character as a personal quality and a character as a social function, which we really need to kind of think about. Same applies to our assessments of like presidents or politicians. So we vote for someone who is not just a good person and kind person, but somebody who can give an order to kill people in other countries. And so we choose a person for his or her professional qualities, for a particular function or for a particular job. And I think that distinction is very important for us. Tony, I think you have a comment.
Yes, well, very, very interesting questions all day through, however, but also now. I want to comment on what you said earlier, Sergei, basically with the case here in Greece, which could also be a presentation in this conference. We had, when a few months ago in February, a movement began, which was framed by the news as the Greek Me Too movement. And we witnessed there a very heavy, I shall say, cancel culture tactics, shall I say, on two, basically they were focused on two celebrities, high-profile people here in Greece. The one, he was a very known celebrity, an actor. Both were actors, actually, very good actors, and very known and very famous here in Greece. And the other even was the director of the National Theatre of Greece. And I think overnight, somehow overnight, when there were rumors about they having the director of Greece was accused of having child abuse, and the other, he was basically accused of for two by many people, but the one is still ongoing, rape and on sexual assaults on women in general, and of being very, very a revenge person, because he didn't let other people when they didn't do what he wanted, then he just canceled them from the theater, from the actors. And the people, they practically canceled them, because overnight both ended up in prison, and also the people, they didn't want to hear them. They changed overall the mind. What's interesting though is that their advocates, they used character assassination techniques against the victims of their assaults in order to say that these are not very reliable accusers. And this is very interesting, but because we have on the one hand the people making cancel culture, and of course they were cancelled from their professions, etc., and for the positions, they ended up in jail. But after that, as a defense strategy, they used character assassination in order to deconstruct their accusations of their accusers. So it's interesting again what Sergei said about the context. Always all these things are being used, and perhaps in the same situation they might be used in different aspects and different strategies. So I'm not so sure, however, from all the discussion, if cancel culture is a technique of character assassination or something very different, and perhaps if they can, as we see in this case, interchangeably play among them all these things. So I think I don't know if this question has an answer, but I believe that it's something we can work on.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, so victim blaming is a popular technique when it comes to basically all this rape accidents. And obviously, in this case, we also have to talk about cultural stereotypes and gender as an important factor here. So what we discuss in here is actually well discussed in literature, in fact, when we talk about victim blaming. But speaking of whether about the relationship between character assassination and cancel culture, well, to me, as I mentioned early in the morning, I think we have to focus on the process of canceling and the functionality of canceling, what it means and how it's exercised, which indeed is very synonymous to character assassination, as we talk about. However, social culture, cancel culture as a socio-cultural concept needs to be discussed in a more broader terms. And we're still trying to make sense of what it is and what it represents. So that's why we're doing this conference.
Can I jump in, Serge? Sorry,
yeah.
I should have raised my hand, and Marta has a comment as well. But one of the things that was striking to me as I started doing the research for my presentation is just how similar the tactics are that we have classified when we were writing the handbook and engaging with your work for the handbook, along with the textbook. You know, we talk about things like labeling and fear mongering and erasing and all of that. And this actually, you know, Martin spoke to this really quite well in his conversation about the historical parallels this morning. But it really strikes me that a lot of the communication strategies that folks use to assassinate others' characters are very much the same things that we tend to use, or that folks tend to use when they are canceling others as well, such as like applying labels and continuing to repeat them and that kind of thing. So whether or not character assassination and cancel culture are sort of one and the same, or whether cancel culture is a form of character assassination, it's definitely clear to me that many of the communication tactics are quite similar. Marta, floor is yours.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Marta Lukačević of Angelo State, Texas Tech University System. A wonderful conference, excellent presentations. I really enjoyed it. And there are two questions that kept on reoccurring to me, actually, just listening through the different panels, because certain common themes, of course, came up. So my first question, this is for anybody who maybe thought of it or may have something to add, but the number one question is, what should be the next steps in outlining the ethics surrounding cancel culture, cancel versus accountability culture, or whatever we want to call it, or what might be that purgatory for those who were offenders indeed, but are trying to come back to the public life, etc. And second question, another theme that was
quite dominant across many presentations was related to media literacy and just information literacy. And what indeed, is this something that we can hope to achieve? Because I believe with the COVID-19 pandemic, we see how far is our medicine, and what a large chunk of the population is kind of not on board with all these medicinal advances that we are having today. And I'm worried that we might be in the same situation when it comes to humanities and social sciences, where we may have all these ideas about information hygiene, etc. But are we really able to convey this to the mass population as educators? Okay, thank you.
Well, I can start, and then maybe colleagues, you can join me and develop on some of these ideas. And so, well, first of all, I mean, you're right about the media literacy. I mean, we talked about the use of media literacy as a way, as a good like preemptive tool to educate people about character attacks. And when I did my research on the use of character attacks in the climate change debate, one possibility that we discussed is how we can actually teach college students and high school students to recognize some of those ad hominem attacks and teach them certain typology, so that when they see this happening online, they recognize, okay, well, there is a character attack is happening. I know what's going to happen next. So he's going to tell me why that person is not legitimate, right? So in other words, one way is to teach people how to recognize some of those techniques, because in fact, you can classify them and you can build a good like literacy program. And then going back to understanding how to tell good information from bad information, obviously it's a unwarranted ad hominem. You should understand that this is some accusation which has no substance, is not based on any particular scientific evidence or any legitimate argument. So obviously we can teach those things. And I know in Canada, Michael, they have some media literacy classes in schools, which America does not have, unfortunately. But Canadians are far advanced because of media ecology and McLuhan's research, and a lot of media scholars work in Canada in particular. So we can learn a lot from Canadians about that. But the second question, how do we become civil, and how do we bring back civility in our discourse? I have no idea. And I don't think we talked about this before. We talked about incivility at the previous conference. And I think we're still struggling with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think Marta's first question really struck for me some of the same things that I was asking Emily that she would not wisely answer because they are speculative questions about where do we go now, given what we know about the polarization of the term cancel culture. I mean, it seems to me, you know, that just there are fundamentally divergent goals with what we do with these types of communication, whether it's, and I'm talking now about social media, but whether it's to allow free expression of ideas, or whether it's, you know, a useful place for people to be called out when they say things that sort of go beyond the boundaries of our social norms and social rules. And you know, I, you know, as someone who really believes in the intense structural inequities that are built into the US society, I think it's important to call out casual and egregious racism and sexism and that kind of thing. And one might hope or wish for social media to be a place to do that, but it is just quite, yeah, just the stark partisan divide that Emily called our attention to really helped me see why so many social media discussions are unproductive. And again, if we think about cancel culture as something that sort of collapses the nuances of character, obviously most social media does that and is designed to do that and has algorithms, as some of our speakers spoke to today, that circulate controversy and not, you know, the context or the stuff behind the scenes. And so I really struggle to think about where we go next, but certainly as an educator, I do have hope in helping students and all people recognize these, not only the communication tactics that we see, but also understanding why social media companies operate the way we do. The book Algorithms of Oppression blew my mind when I read it this summer, in terms of thinking about how very built into the algorithms of social media are things that are incredibly actively racist and disempowering and that kind of thing. But yeah, you know, we at CARP have always taken somewhat of a morally neutral stance, recognizing that character attacks can be a force for justice in the world. And, you know, the first paper I ever did researching character assassination was about Edward R. Murrow assassinating the character of Joseph McCarthy. And like, hey, I'm here for it. McCarthy was a slime. He did awful things to American public discourse in the middle of the century. And so I want to recognize, you know, cancel culture and, you know, character attacks as an ability to hold people accountable. And so I hope that as we kind of continue to fumble through the mediated culture that we live in, we can still recognize the potential of these things for good in the world. That was a thinking out loud, not I have an actual comment or point, but I you know, your points are really important, Marta.
It is very important. And I think one thing I would like to piggyback on what you, Jennifer, have said. So let's not forget why we sometimes feel like we're trapped in this hamster in the wheel conversations, because a lot of, you know, what we call cancel culture campaigns and those discussions, they're the fuel for the internet economy. And in fact, I mean, that's why character assassination remains the major currency of today's media business model. You know, without those conversations, without those clicks, without those retweets, there wouldn't be social media. Unfortunately, we also have to look into some major kind of media business models and why social media keeps kind of promoting some of those negative discourses, and why it thrives, and why some people make money on clickbait and hateful speech and other instances. Anyone else?
Almost exhausted their potential.
Yeah, we're really exhausted. Divine, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I really want to thank.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. You've been with us the whole day. I really appreciate your, you know, diligence and stamina.
Dedication.
Yeah, yeah. So I really want to thank everyone for the presentations. In fact, I was really, you know, I learned a lot today. One brief comment I also want to make is about how then do we overcome or redeem our images when or strategies for more or less redemption. And Kenneth Beck, you know, provides one method, that is purification. And so how those who have been, you know, scapegoated or who have been, you know, assigned guilt, you know, redeem themselves through the terminology of the theoretical concept of purification, and also involves some, you know, rhetorical strategies that rhetorics or political figures also use to redeem their image, like Bill Clinton, how he survived the Monica Lewinsky affair, you know, even Donald Trump, how he's still, you know, one key figure in the Republican Party after a double impeachment procedure, and he's likely to even feature in the 2024 election. So I believe going forward, character assassination and how we redeem ourselves, or figures redeem themselves, will be also a good place for us as scholars. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for raising these questions.
As perhaps a fellow rhetorician, I would just say I love thinking about it in terms of, you know, there's been a whole bunch of research already done on purification and apologia strategies. And I think some of the stuff that comes out of corporate communication and your world, Serge, can speak to, you know, the very needed rhetorical strategies that can repair images. And I'll, not claiming credit, but also point us to Josh's comment in the chat about Bill Benoit's image repair strategy and the typology of image promotion. And so it's great to know that we don't have to start from scratch in thinking about what effective responses to being canceled or character assassination could be. But yes, great.
And here is a perfect moment to promote our book, where we have one chapter dedicated to reputation management and image repair and reputational crises and how to overcome some of those reputational crises. And our discussion was based indeed on Will Benoit's writings and the writings of Tim Coombs as well.
And as Josh points out in the comments as well, he's done work on image prepare strategies that help as well. I know it feels gross to promote your own work, but yes. I
mean, it's America, that's what we do here.
Yeah.
All right, colleagues. Well, so I think we had quite a fruitful and productive discussion today. I know we still have 30 minutes left, unless anybody has any questions. I would like to wrap up for today and get ready for tomorrow, because tomorrow we have a really, really important day and several panels. And then wonderful wrap-up remarks by our distinguished Dr. Shiraev. And let's congratulate you all on this wonderful conference. I think we are really, really doing something important here. I'm really proud of ourselves.
Thank you for moderating our final wrap-up discussion, Serge, and thank you to all of the participants who stuck around for what I know was a very, very long day. I do greatly wish that we could be gathering to have some snacks and alcoholic beverages together, but since it is not yet safe to do that, thank you all for your insightful comments, questions, and thoughts, and again, for sticking with us all day, because that's a long time to be on Zoom.
And we're going to have those beverages with and without alcohol next time in the food, vegetarian, vegan, and whatever you have it, just for variety and for diversity, we're going to have it. So till tomorrow. So Dr. Samoilenko, Serge, tomorrow at US East Coast time, what will be the beginning?
So 8 o'clock, we have our first panel chaired by Martin X on character assassination and international relations. And we have a nice lineup, starting with Ekaterina Yegorova talking about character assassination in information warfare. What a great way to start a day.
What can be better? Exactly.
All right, well, good night for those of you that are far away where it's very late. And for my colleagues here in the United States, enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll see you all tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Take care.